The twin moons of Zerine Prime floated above the royal palace like silver eyes, watching everything in silence. The palace guards stood tall in shining armor made of crystal metal. Among them was a single human, Elias. He stood at the back of the line, quiet, almost invisible. His armor was old, scratched, and smaller than everyone else's. Other guards often whispered when he passed. "Look at him," one alien snickered. "A human guarding the royal family? What a joke." Another laughed. "Maybe they just keep him around as a pet." Elias never replied. He only kept his eyes forward, his hand resting on the plasma spear that hummed softly at his side. He had joined the Royal Army 5 years ago, not for power, not for fame, but because he wanted a place to belong. In this galaxy, humans were servants, miners, or soldiers who died young. Elias had survived too long, and that made people uncomfortable. That evening, something felt strange. The air smelled like burnt metal, and the sky flickered with distant lightning. The royal celebration was about to begin, Princess Lyria's coronation as future ruler of the Zerine Empire. Thousands of guests filled the shining halls, aliens of every kind wearing jewels that glowed like stars. Music filled the air, but Elias could feel it. Something was wrong. He stood near the garden gate, far from the main crowd, watching the princess from a distance. She was beautiful but distant, with silver hair that shimmered like light and eyes that glowed faint blue. She was kind to her people, but to humans she never spoke. Elias remembered the first time he saw her 3 years ago. She had walked past him as if he didn't exist. That was the rule in the Empire. Humans were to be unseen, unheard, and forgotten. Suddenly, the sky above the palace flashed red. The celebration lights flickered. A deep vibration shook the ground. Then came the explosion. The sound tore through the night like thunder. A wave of fire burst from the west wing of the palace. Cries echoed as guests screamed and ran in every direction. The guards panicked, some frozen in fear, others shouting orders that made no sense. Elias didn't wait. He ran toward the explosion. "Human! Stop! That's not your duty!" Someone shouted behind him, but he didn't listen. The smoke was thick, the air hot and bitter. Through the chaos he heard a scream, a voice he had only heard from a distance before. "Help, someone, please!" It was Princess Lyria. Without thinking, Elias charged forward. He pushed through falling debris, coughing as flames burned his arms. He saw her trapped near a collapsing pillar, her gown torn, eyes wide with fear. 2 shadowed figures aimed laser rifles at her. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fallen guard's shield and ran in front of her just as the rifles fired. The energy bolts hit the shield, sending a shockwave through his body. His arm went numb, but he stood firm. "Run!" he shouted, but the princess didn't move. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in her life. A human was standing between her and death. The assassins reloaded. Elias rushed forward, slamming his damaged shield into one and stabbing the other with his spear. Sparks flew. His armor was scorched, his skin burned, but he didn't stop. He kept fighting, every hit weaker than the last. Behind him, the princess cried, "Please, you'll die." He turned his head slightly, his voice calm even as fire burned around them. "If I fall, at least you'll live." One final explosion knocked them both to the ground. Elias covered her with his body, shielding her from the blast. Everything went silent for a moment. Then he heard footsteps, royal guards arriving too late. He tried to stand but fell to his knees, blood running down his arm. As his vision blurred, he saw the princess kneeling beside him. Her eyes were wide with shock and confusion. No alien had ever seen a human risk his life for them. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you protect me?" Elias smiled weakly. "Because no one else did." Then his head dropped forward and he collapsed. The princess screamed his name, though she didn't even know it until that moment. The palace lights flickered back on. The royal guard surrounded them. One guard shouted, "The human saved her!" "He saved the princess." The queen's messenger arrived moments later, his voice trembling. "Your Majesty must be told, a human has bled for the crown." As the medical drones carried Elias away, Princess Lyria stood frozen. She touched the blood on her hand, the blood of a man who had no reason to save her. For the first time, she didn't see a human as a servant. She saw him as something else, someone who had done what no one else dared. And as the night burned with the smell of smoke and fire, one truth echoed across the palace. The human who didn't belong had just saved their future queen. The night after the explosion, silence ruled the royal palace. The grand halls, once full of laughter, now smelled of smoke and blood. Burn marks scarred the golden walls. The servants whispered, afraid even to breathe loudly. In the healing chamber, Elias lay still inside a glass pod filled with glowing blue light. Tiny repair drones moved over his burned skin, fixing the damage cell by cell. His breathing was slow but steady. Around him, alien doctors whispered in their language. Why would a human do this? Is he loyal? Or planning something? No human risks his life for the crown. But at the center of the room, the tall figure of Queen Seraphine stood like a statue. Her golden eyes were cold, her long white robes untouched by the chaos outside. Everyone bowed when she entered. Everyone except Elias, who was still unconscious. The queen's voice was calm but sharp like a blade. Who ordered the human to save my daughter? No one, your majesty, replied her general nervously. He acted on his own. The queen's eyes narrowed. A human guard who disobeys orders and runs toward the throne? Either he is foolish, or he has another purpose. The doctors went silent. Even the sound of the healing pod seemed to fade. Princess Lyria stood behind her mother, her face pale. She had barely slept. Her mind kept replaying that moment, the explosion, the heat, and that human standing between her and death. She had never seen eyes like his, full of pain but also full of peace. Mother, she said softly, he saved my life. Queen Seraphine didn't look at her. Perhaps he wanted to get close to you. Do you not see how dangerous this is, child? What if this was part of the assassination plan? Lyria's eyes widened. No, he fought them. He was hurt protecting me. The queen turned slowly toward her daughter. And you think that makes him innocent? Her voice was calm but cold. A snake can bite you while smiling. Tears filled the princess's eyes. She wanted to argue, but the queen raised a hand. Enough. Until we know who sent the assassins, no one, especially that human, can be trusted. Later that night, when the guards left, Princess Lyria slipped quietly into the healing chamber. The room was dim, lit only by the soft blue glow of the pod. She walked closer, her footsteps light. Elias was awake. His eyes opened slowly as he saw her reflection on the glass. He looked weak, his voice hoarse. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. Lyria froze. You can talk. Elias gave a faint smile. A little. Hurts when I breathe. She stared at him, at the bandages covering his chest, at the scars on his arms. Why did you do it? She whispered. Why would you protect me? Elias looked at the ceiling. Because I could, she frowned. That's not an answer. He turned his head slightly toward her. When I saw you in danger, I didn't see a princess. I saw someone who didn't deserve to die for another person's greed. There was no pride in his tone, no fear, just truth. For the first time in her life, the princess didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened. I didn't even know your name, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Now you do, Elias. She repeated it softly. Elias. It felt strange on her tongue, like a name from a forgotten world. The next morning, the queen called her council. The hall filled with the sound of angry nobles and generals. This human must be questioned. One shouted. He might be part of the attack, said another. A common soldier cannot be near the princess again. The queen raised her hand. Silence filled the room. Her voice was cool and measured. The human will remain under watch. He is to stay in the healing chamber until I decide his fate. Her daughter stepped forward, trembling. Mother, please, he saved me. He deserves, but the queen cut her off. He deserves to be alive. That is already more than most humans receive. That night, Elias woke again. He saw a reflection in the glass. The queen herself standing there silently watching him. Her voice came from the shadows. You are not like the others. Elias didn't move. I never wanted to be. The queen's eyes glowed faintly. What are you after, human? Power, freedom, or my daughter's heart? Elias looked at her calmly. I don't want anything, your majesty. I just did what was right. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the queen turned to leave. As the door slid shut behind her, she whispered something so quiet that even Elias barely heard it. Sometimes, the right thing is the most dangerous. 3 nights passed since the explosion, yet the palace still trembled with fear. Every corner was guarded, every light scanned the dark. Still, the queen didn't sleep. She trusted no one. But Elias was healing faster than any human should. The alien doctors whispered that his body had adapted to their medicine too quickly. He could stand now, though the scars still burned. He was still inside the guarded chamber, watched by soldiers day and night. He didn't complain. He just sat quietly, polishing his old armor, the same one that had saved the princess. That evening, the queen finally visited again. Her golden eyes studied him carefully. "You heal fast," she said. Elias bowed his head slightly. "Your healers are skilled." "Or you are hiding something," she replied sharply. Elias met her gaze. "Maybe I'm just lucky, Your Majesty." The queen didn't smile. She turned away. "Luck doesn't exist in this palace." Before she could leave, a young guard ran in, his face pale. "Your Majesty!" There's movement outside the south wall. The queen's expression changed instantly. "How many?" "Too many," the guard gasped. "We think it's another attack." The palace alarm screamed. Red lights flashed through the halls. Elias reached for his spear, but the guards around him raised their weapons. "You stay here, human," one barked. "I can help," Elias replied firmly. "No one asked for your help." But as the sound of explosions echoed closer, Elias didn't wait for permission. He pushed past them and ran toward the danger. Smoke filled the grand corridors. Sparks rained from the ceilings. Alien soldiers fought shadowed attackers who moved like ghosts. These were not simple assassins. They were trained killers wearing black armor marked with a strange red symbol. Elias spotted Princess Lyria across the hall, surrounded by terrified maids. A blast hit the wall near her, throwing her to the ground. Without thinking, Elias sprinted through the flames. He grabbed her just before another blast hit the spot where she'd been lying. "Not you again," she gasped, half crying, half laughing in fear. "You attract trouble," Elias said, breathing hard. "Stay behind me." From the other side of the hall, one of the black-armored assassins shouted, "The queen dies tonight." Elias froze. They weren't after the princess this time. He turned sharply toward the royal throne room and ran. The path was long and broken, flames licking at the walls, debris blocking his way. He forced his body forward, ignoring the pain in his ribs. The queen was inside the throne room, protected by her elite guards, but they were falling one by one. The enemy had already breached the gate. Elias burst through the smoke. "Your Majesty," he shouted. The queen turned in surprise, just as a sniper beam fired toward her. Without a second thought, Elias jumped between her and the beam. It hit his shoulder, burning deep, but he didn't stop. He charged the sniper, slamming his spear into the attacker and throwing him to the floor. Another came from behind, but Elias twisted, blocking the strike with his arm and striking back with full force. Blood ran down his arm. His vision blurred. Still, he fought, not because of duty, but because he refused to see the innocent die again. When it was over, silence filled the hall. The queen stood frozen, her gown torn, her crown lying on the ground. Around her lay the bodies of the attackers. In the middle stood Elias, covered in ash and blood, breathing heavily. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then slowly, the queen stepped forward. Her eyes, always cold and proud, softened. "You protected me," she said quietly. Elias dropped his spear and knelt. "My duty is to protect the crown." Her voice trembled for the first time. "No, you protected me." She knelt beside him, touching his burned arm. "No alien has ever made me feel safe, like you just did." The guards entered, stunned to see the queen beside a wounded human. She rose to her full height and spoke with power that filled the hall. "From this moment," she declared, "Elias of Earth will guard my daughter, and me. He has earned that right with his blood." The crowd fell silent. No one dared argue. Elias bowed his head. "I will serve until my last breath." The queen looked down at him. "You already have, human." Later that night, as Elias rested in the infirmary again, Princess Lyria came quietly to his side. Her voice was soft. "You saved her too," he smiled faintly. She wouldn't like to hear that. "She already said it," the princess whispered. "You changed something in her tonight." Elias looked out the window where the two moons shone again. "I don't want to change anyone," he said softly. "I just want peace," Lyria smiled. "Then maybe. You already found it." But outside the palace walls in the dark, a shadow watched through a broken window. A low voice whispered through a communicator, "The human lives. The queen trusts him. Phase 2 begins." The royal palace of Zerine Prime had never seen a sight like this. a human soldier walking beside the alien queen. Every step Elias took echoed through the glass halls. The guards and nobles stared, whispering behind jeweled masks. Some glared with anger, others with fear. In their world, humans were workers, not protectors of royalty. But the queen's command had been clear. Elias of Earth will protect my daughter. His loyalty is proven in blood, so no one dared to speak against it, not openly. Days passed. The palace began to recover from the attacks. New guards replaced the fallen ones. The scent of burnt crystal still lingered in the air, a reminder of the chaos. Elias now wore royal armor, black and silver, engraved with the queen's crest. Yet he still felt like an outsider. Wherever he went, eyes followed him. At dinner halls, alien nobles whispered, "Look at him sitting near the royal table." Has the queen lost her mind? Next thing we know, she'll crown a human. Elias ignored them. He was used to being hated. Hate was easier to carry than guilt. Princess Lyria, however, did not ignore it. She noticed the way he sat quietly, eating only what was necessary. She noticed how he stood outside her door at night, motionless for hours. One morning she found him in the palace courtyard training with his spear. His moves were precise, no wasted energy, no pride, no fear. She approached softly. "You train even after saving 2 lives?" she asked. Elias smiled faintly. "That's why I'm still alive." She tilted her head, watching him. "Do you ever rest?" He stopped and looked at her. Rest is for those who belong somewhere. Her heart tightened. She wanted to say something kind, but before she could, the royal advisor, Lord Varen, entered the courtyard. Lord Varen was tall, his armor shining gold, his tone sharp. "Your Highness," he said to Lyria, "forgive me, but this man, this human, should not be allowed near the throne room." Lyria frowned. "My mother trusts him," Varen bowed slightly. "And that is her mistake. Humans serve their own kind first. You forget, Your Highness, and their kind once rebelled against the Empire." Elias didn't reply. He simply cleaned his weapon and walked away. Varen called after him, voice dripping with poison. "You think saving the queen makes you royal? You'll always be a slave pretending to wear armor." Elias stopped but didn't turn. His calm voice echoed, "Armor doesn't make a soldier. Courage does." Then he left. That night, Elias stood guard outside the princess's chamber as usual. Through the half-open door, he heard her playing soft alien music, sad, gentle tones like raindrops on glass. When she saw him standing there, she asked quietly, "Does it bother you? What they say?" Elias shook his head. "Words can't hurt more than bullets." Lyria stepped closer. "But it's not fair." "You saved us," he smiled. "Fairness doesn't exist in power, princess. Only truth does." She looked at him for a long moment. "And what's your truth, Elias?" He hesitated. "I've seen too many die for nothing. I don't want anyone else to die while I can stop it." Lyria whispered. "Even if it costs your life." He nodded. "Especially then." The next day, the queen held a grand council in the throne room. Nobles and generals gathered, their faces glowing under the golden light. Elias stood beside the princess at the queen's command, silent and still. Whispers filled the room again. Lord Varen stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this cannot continue. The people talk. They say the royal family trusts a human more than their own blood." Another noble shouted, "Remove him or the army will rebel." The queen sat unmoved, her golden eyes calm. "Are these threats, Lord Varen?" Varen bowed. "No, Majesty, warnings. A human near the throne is an insult to every Zerine." The hall went silent. Everyone waited for the queen's answer. She stood slowly, her voice like thunder. "The one who saved my blood has more honor than those born into it. If loyalty is an insult, then the throne itself is guilty." The nobles lowered their heads, afraid to argue. But as Elias looked around, he saw their eyes, filled with quiet rage. He knew this peace would not last. Later, as the council ended, Varen whispered to another noble, "If the queen won't remove him, we will." That night, in the quiet corridor, Princess Lyria found Elias again polishing his armor. "Mother defended you today," she said softly. Elias nodded. "She defended what was right. That's harder than defending a life." Lyria smiled sadly. "You don't talk like a soldier." "Because I've seen what soldiers become when they forget why they fight," he replied. Outside, thunder rumbled again. just like the night of the first attack. Neither of them knew that in the shadows of the palace, new enemies were already moving, and one of them wore royal armor. The golden palace of Zirine Prime glittered in the daylight, but inside darkness had already entered. Rumors spread like fire. The human had cursed the throne. Some said he used forbidden tech to survive the explosion. Others whispered that the queen had fallen under his spell. Elias heard it all, but he never reacted. He stood guard every day, calm and silent, beside the princess's chamber. His loyalty didn't need words, but those whispers were poison, and poison always finds a way to strike. That evening, the queen called a secret meeting with her generals. Lord Varen was among them, standing tall, his eyes glowing with quiet hate. "The people fear him," Varen said smoothly. "They think a human in the palace brings bad luck." The queen's voice was firm. "Then tell the people the truth. He saved your queen and your princess." Varen bowed. "Of course, your majesty." But inside, his mind burned with rage. He had spent his life serving the crown, dreaming of power. Now a human stood closer to the queen than he ever could. That night he made his choice. He would not serve a throne that bowed to a human. In the lower halls of the palace, Varen met a group of rebels, the same men who had attacked weeks ago. Their leader, cloaked in black, smiled coldly. "So, the great Lord Varen finally understands." Varen's jaw tightened. The queen has lost her way. She trusts the enemy. She must be replaced, and the human must die. The rebel leader chuckled. "Then let us make sure both happen at once." They made a plan to poison the royal guards, disable the palace defense field, and strike before sunrise. Meanwhile, Princess Lyria couldn't sleep. She walked to the balcony where Elias stood watching the stars. His armor reflected the soft blue light of the twin moons. "Why do you always stay awake?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Stars don't rest, Princess. They only fade when it's time." She stepped closer. "You speak like someone who's already tired of living." He looked at her, his eyes calm. "When you've lost as much as I have, every new sunrise feels like a gift." Before she could reply, the palace lights flickered, once, twice, then died. The air filled with a low hum. Elias's body tensed. "Stay inside," he said quickly. "What's happening?" "Trouble." The first explosion came from the east wing. The sound shook the floors. Fire alarms screamed. Elias grabbed his spear and ran toward the noise. The smell of poison gas filled the air. Guards were coughing, falling one by one. He reached the control room and froze. Lord Varen stood there, blade in hand, surrounded by fallen guards. "Varen," Elias shouted. "What have you done?" Varen's smile was bitter. "Saved our people from your infection." Elias raised his weapon. "You're killing your own soldiers." Varen's voice dripped with hate. "Better them than letting a human rule our skies." They charged. Sparks flew as metal clashed. Varen was skilled, fast, but Elias fought with something greater: purpose. He blocked, countered, pushed forward. "You think loyalty gives you power?" Varen growled. "You're nothing but an animal pretending to be noble." Elias struck back hard, disarming him. "Then this animal just saved your queen twice." Before Varen could respond, the door behind them burst open. The rebel soldiers stormed in. Elias grabbed a fallen shield, defending against laser fire. "Run, Varen," the rebel leader shouted. "Leave him, we'll finish this." But Varen didn't run. He tried to strike Elias again, and in that moment Elias's spear moved faster. The blade pierced through Varen's chest. Varen's eyes widened. He fell to the floor, whispering, "She'll never accept you." Elias knelt beside him, whispering, "Maybe not, but she'll live." Then he stood, facing the rebels. His armor burned, his arms bleeding, but he kept fighting. Every swing full of rage, not for himself, but for the queen, for the princess, for peace. By dawn, it was over. The palace was silent again, smoke rising through broken windows. Elias stood in the throne hall, his spear bent, his armor covered in ash. The queen entered, escorted by royal healers. Her eyes widened as she saw the bodies. "What happened?" Elias bowed weakly. "Your general betrayed you." "I stopped him." She stepped closer, shock and sadness mixing in her voice. "Varen, he was with me for 30 years. Elias looked down. "Sometimes loyalty fades before breath does." The queen touched his shoulder. "And sometimes it grows stronger than blood." As the medical drones carried the bodies away, Princess Lyria ran to Elias and hugged him tightly. "You're hurt." He smiled faintly. "Just a little." Tears glimmered in her eyes. "You keep saving everyone, Elias. Who will save you?" He looked at her softly. "No one needs to. I'm where I belong." But behind him the queen watched quietly, realizing the truth. The human she once doubted now stood as the only thing keeping her empire alive. The palace of Zirine Prime was quiet again, too quiet. The smoke from the rebellion had cleared, but the smell of loss still hung in the air. Soldiers moved through the marble halls, cleaning the blood of their own. At the center of the great throne room, Elias stood with his broken spear in hand. His armor was cracked, his body bruised, yet his eyes were steady. He looked like a man who had given everything, and had nothing left to give. Queen Seraphine entered slowly, her royal robe trailing across the shattered floor. The golden crown on her head looked heavier than ever. Behind her, Princess Lyria followed, her face pale and tear-streaked. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence felt sacred. Finally, the queen broke it. "You stopped the rebellion," she said softly. "You saved this throne once again." Elias bowed his head. "It's my duty." The queen looked at him for a long moment. "No, Elias, it was never your duty to die for us. And yet, you did." She walked closer. "When I first saw you, I saw a human. Now I see the only being who remembered what honor means." Elias lowered his eyes. "Honor is just a word, Your Majesty. People use it until it's convenient to forget." Her voice grew gentle. "And yet you remembered it, even when my own people forgot." Lyria stepped closer, holding a metal badge in her hands, the royal insignia of Zirine. She smiled faintly. "My mother wants to give you this," she said softly. "The Star of Life. No human has ever received it." Elias looked at the shining emblem, unsure. "I don't need rewards." The queen raised her chin. "Then take it not as a reward, but as a promise, that your courage will not be forgotten." Elias hesitated, then bowed and accepted it. The hall erupted in respectful silence. No one dared to clap. It wasn't a celebration, it was a moment of truth. That night, the queen couldn't sleep. She walked through the empty corridors, remembering everything, her distrust, her anger, her arrogance. She remembered the first explosion, her fear, and the human who stood before her again and again, facing death without hesitation. She found herself standing outside Elias's quarters. The door was open. Inside he was awake, sitting on the floor, fixing his broken spear under dim light. "You don't rest either," she said quietly. He looked up. "Too much noise in my head." She smiled slightly. "Mine too." For a while they sat in silence. Then softly she spoke. "Do you hate us, Elias?" "My kind, for what we've done to yours." He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Hate is heavy. I carried it once. It nearly killed me. Now I carry duty instead." The queen's eyes softened. "And what if your duty ends?" He smiled faintly. "Then I'll find another person to protect." Something inside her broke, not in pain, but in realization. She saw him not as a soldier, not as a human, but as something far greater, a reminder of what her empire had lost. Humanity. The next day, the queen gathered the royal court. The great hall glowed with golden light. The nobles whispered again, afraid of what they would hear this time. The queen stood on the steps of her throne, her voice strong and clear. "Lords and generals of Zirine, our empire stands because of this man. Not because of blood or power or rank, but because of courage." The hall fell silent. "From this day," she continued, "Elias of Earth shall not serve beneath us, but beside us." Gas filled the air. "He will stand as protector of the crown, and son of the royal house of Zirine." Even Elias froze. "Your Majesty, what are you saying?" The queen looked down at him with soft eyes. "You came to us with nothing. You gave us everything. You are no longer a guard, Elias. You are my son." The entire hall went silent. No one dared to breathe. Lyria's eyes filled with tears. "Brother," she whispered. The queen stepped down and placed her hand gently on his head. "From now on, no human shall bow in this palace again." Later, when the hall was empty, Elias stood on the balcony looking at the twin moons. Lyria joined him quietly. "How does it feel?" she asked. He smiled. "Strange. I spent my whole life being nothing, and now I'm part of something I never thought I'd touch." She looked at him gently. You didn't change to fit this world, Elias. You changed this world to fit you. He looked at her, then back at the stars. Maybe we both did. Below them, the lights of the city burned bright. For the first time, humans and aliens walked side by side, not as enemies, but as equals. And on that quiet night, the Queen stood alone in her chamber, whispering to herself. He came to us as a guard, but became the heart of our throne. Dawn rose quietly over Zirine Prime, painting the sky in soft pink and silver. The war was over, the rebellion crushed, yet a strange calm rested on the palace, the kind that only comes after great storms. In the grand courtyard, Elias stood before rows of alien and human soldiers. The new dawn reflected on his polished armor, no longer the black of a guard, but royal silver trimmed with gold. Across his chest glowed the Queen's insignia, protector of the crown. For the first time in history, humans stood side by side with aliens, not as slaves or servants, but equals. They wore the same uniform, carried the same crest, and looked to the same leader. At the top of the marble steps stood Queen Seraphine, tall and proud, her golden robes fluttering in the wind. Beside her, Princess Lyria smiled softly, her silver hair shining in the sunlight. The Queen raised her voice, her tone echoing across the courtyard. Today the Empire stands united. The one who bled for our future is no longer a stranger. Elias of Earth, my protector, my son, shall stand as bridge between two worlds. The crowd bowed deeply. Some wept, others simply stared in awe. Elias knelt before the Queen. Your Majesty, I do not deserve, but she interrupted gently, placing her hand on his head. You deserve peace, Elias. That is rarer than any crown. The Queen's voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were proud. He protected my daughter with his life. Now the Queen calls him her own. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elias stood alone on the highest balcony of the palace. The sky glowed red, the same color as the fire from the night he first saved the princess. He took a deep breath of the cool air. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt home. Footsteps echoed behind him. Princess Lyria appeared, wearing a simple silver dress instead of royal armor. She smiled. You're always up here when the sky burns red. Elias nodded. It reminds me of the first night I saw you and the night everything changed. She stepped beside him, her voice soft. Do you ever regret it? Saving me, fighting for us? He shook his head slowly. If I hadn't, I'd still be just another soldier. I'd rather die once for something that matters than live forever for nothing. She looked at him quietly. And now you matter to everyone. To me, to my mother, to this world, he smiled faintly. I'm still human, Lyria. There will always be some who never accept me. She looked at him seriously. Then they'll have to live with it. Because I do. For a moment, they both stood in silence, watching the stars blink alive one by one. Later that night, the Queen held a private meeting in her chamber. Only Elias and Lyria were present. The council fears what's coming, the Queen began softly. The outer colonies are restless. They see our unity as weakness, Elias nodded. Peace always looks like weakness to those who only understand power. The Queen looked at him, her eyes full of warmth. Then let them see that a human and an alien can stand together, not as ruler and servant, but as family. Lyria placed her hand on his. You've already changed the throne, Elias. Now you'll change the stars. The next morning, the people of Zirine gathered across the city. From the largest tower, the Queen's voice echoed through giant holographic screens. From this day, humans will no longer be slaves of the Zirine Empire. They will be citizens of it, protected by the same law, honored by the same light. Cheers rose from every corner. Tears ran down faces that had known generations of suffering. Elias watched it all from the balcony, his heart heavy and light at the same time. He whispered to himself, if only they could see this, the ones who didn't make it. Lyria turned to him. They do, through you. That night when the stars burned bright above, Elias removed his armor and walked through the gardens. The air smelled of rain and flowers. Children, alien and human, played together near the fountains. Their laughter echoed like music. The Queen appeared behind him. Her voice was soft but strong. You gave them a future, my son. Elias turned. No, Your Majesty. You gave them hope, she smiled. Hope needs a face, and yours has become that. For the first time, Elias didn't bow. He looked her in the eyes, not as a guard, but as family. Then I'll never let that hope fall. The queen nodded proudly. That's all I ever wanted to hear. She walked away slowly, leaving him under the twin moons. Elias looked up at the sky. The stars seemed closer than ever, almost like they were listening. He whispered, I was once a human who didn't belong anywhere, but now I belong to two worlds. And as the night wrapped the palace in silence, the human who had come as a servant stood as the living bridge between species. Proof that courage could unite even the coldest hearts. The human guard who never belonged had become the son of two worlds.